for you. So my name is Julian Dolce, and I'm the platform lead for AIR at QNext. And basically what I do is I lead the AIR SDK development team. So we do all the UI controls, all of the APIs, like the platform APIs, all the AIR native extensions for BlackBerry 10. There's some ways to kind of get in touch with me. Twitter is probably the best way. Just send me a message, and I can, try and help you out as best I can. So targeting multiple devices. So this is one of the things that I think is really, really important when you start developing for BlackBerry 10. That you have to think about, far in advance or early on in your project. When you're developing your apps for PlayBook, you're, basically just working with 1024 by 600, and you may have hard-coded some of those sizes in there, these sorts of things. But now that now we have these different devices and different screen sizes and different resolutions and different DPIs, it's a little bit more work to go back and try and convert all these things to get them to work correctly and look correctly. So I really encourage you to think about these things ahead of time before you start digging into building new applications. So you can kind of future-proof your app up front, and when new devices get released, you're well ahead of everybody. So here's some things to think about. The first thing is multiple DPIs. So because the screen density is so much higher on the BlackBerry 10 phone than it is on PlayBook, if you just to take your PlayBook app and put it on there on the BlackBerry 10, you'll probably see that buttons are really, really small and font size is really, really small. Because it is twice the DPI. So, you want to be able to resize your assets if you have, lots of PNGs and bitmaps and things like that. You want to be able to resize that or, scale 9 them somehow so that you can, easily scale them yourself. And then you want to, look at all your font sizes and adjust them accordingly. A good kind of starting point is, just double the font size. Start from there, and then you can kind of tweak as you go and as you see fit. And then so screen sizes. So when I talk about screen sizes, I mean the actual physical size of the device. And so you look at PlayBook, it's 7 inches diagonal or something close to that. It has a lot more screen real estate for a lot of these things, and you'll probably lay out your application much differently than you would, say, on something like the phone, which is around 4 inches diagonal. So to help with that, we've actually added 2 or 3 new APIs on the device class that we have in our SDK. And so you're actually able to get the screen width, the screen height, and the screen diagonal, all in inches. And this will allow you to, determine how you want to lay out your app, because you don't want to just go off the DPI, because we may in the future have something that is, a 7-inch tablet with the same DPI as the phone at the 4-inch size. So you want to really go off of this to see how much screen real estate you have. So we also added, BlackBerry 10 controls and skins. So we've updated all the look and feel to make them look like they're native to the platform. One of the things that we've done and changed, if you remember from the PlayBook days and the PlayBook SDK, we actually took all of the assets, and they were actually compiled into this UI SWIC that we had, the QNext UI SWIC. And so when you deployed your app, you would get all these assets with it. Well, that becomes a little bit more difficult now that we have all these different devices that you're going to be deploying apps on. And so we don't want you to have to compile in the assets for the PlayBook and the smartphone, and then the QWERTY keyboard phone that'll be coming out as well. So we really want you guys to not have to worry about that. So what we've actually done is we've created this QNext skins.ame, and it's just an ActionScript-only native extension that actually sits on the device. And so when you deploy your app to it, it will automatically detect, hey, I'm running on this device. Use the appropriate assets, and it'll automatically happen for you. So no matter where you are, and this goes for assets, but it also goes for a lot of the configuration stuff that we have. So things like default font sizes and default layouts and positioning and padding for all of our controls. So everything will look and be sized correctly depending on what device you're running on. And the one thing about this is actually greatly reduces your application file size, which is a good thing. So that's one big change. And so I'm sure you've seen them all before in a lot of the demos, but here's just kind of a quick screenshot of what they look like. Yeah, you have a question? Yeah, so the question was, do these have the same sort of behaviors as, like the Cascades ones? The short answer is yes. There are definitely some differences in certain places, but we've tried to make them match the look and feel as well as the behavior. There are some things that you need to do. In that specific case that you asked, when you expand it, does it push all the content down, like one of the drop downs or the pickers? If you put those in one of our containers, it will automatically do that for you. But if you just were to take that and put it on your stage, it's not going to do that because it doesn't know what content's underneath it, right? So, okay, so one of the big things in the ways that we enable a lot of this device-dependent or specific behaviors and layouts and things like that is through CSS. So we've written this CSS, very, very basic CSS engine into the SDK. And now all of the controls can be manipulated and properties can be set using CSS. So any public property on a control that is a string, a Boolean, or a numeric type like int or number or uint, you can set those through CSS. So this really makes it easy for you to be able to set up a bunch of things for one device, have a CSS file for one device, and have all your values in there, and then have another CSS file for another device. And so you really don't have to change any code per device. You just load up the CSS when your app starts up, and everything will kind of just use whatever you have in there. So one of the things that's kind of a requirement for this is you need to have a UI component as a subclass. So if you're trying to set this on properties that are not a UI component, then it won't work as expected. And then when we look at layouts and stuff a little bit later, layouts don't automatically pick up this stuff because they're not UI components. But I'll show you how you can do this yourself. So what does this look like? So I've created this very, very simple box class. So the first thing you want to do is do this box class. If you're creating your own component, it extends the UI component. And the first thing you want to do is give it an ID. So you override this protected method, get CSS ID. And you can just return whatever you like. Try to give it something unique to your application so it doesn't collide with anything else that may be in the system. And then I gave it the setter property for the color. So this would be the color that the box would theoretically get drawn in. So now that we have our class set up, I can create some CSS. So I can just create a string in ActionScript, just like you see up there. So I have box as the selector. Can't see the laser. There it is. And then I have specified the color property. And then I've given it a value. Okay. So once we have our CSS string, we just go and inject that into this theme globals class. So there's a static property on theme globals that says, inject this CSS. And basically what that does is it overlays your CSS on top of all of the CSS for all the different controls and components in the SDK. And then when I create a new box, I add it to the stage, and then it automatically says, hey, I'm a red box, and it will draw it in red or whatever color you set. Now, if you wanted to create a external CSS file, there's a couple different ways to do it. One way is to embed the file directly like you see here. So create a property called myStyles, and you embed it just like with the regular embed metadata tag there, and that's up in orange. The MIME type here is really important. You have to give it this application MIME type. And basically what that ends up doing is whatever's embedded, it embeds it as a byte array. And so when you do that, you can get it as a string. So when your app starts up, you can inject the CSS again by just creating that class and converting it to a string. So some more things you can do with this is you can style text. So a lot of the properties have, or a lot of the components have text in them, so things like this label button here. And they take a text format object or instance. So what you can do is you can actually specify all the properties in the text format object by prefixing it with a text dash prefixed on it. So you can see here I've got my label button CSS selector there, and then I've specified text align, text size, text font, and then text color. And so that align, size, font, color are just properties on text format. And so this will automatically format the text inside of my label button. You can also style states. So if you want to have different states to be different colors, so if you look at the label button here, for example, when we press down on it, the background turns blue, so we want the text to change as well. So you can specify these state selectors by doing colon and specifying the state. And you can find the strings for those in the skin states class. So there's this class that basically is just an enumeration of all the different skins that our components support. And so you can go there, find the string, and put it in there. And basically all this does is takes the values that you have here and overlays it on top of the default. And so it'll keep all the other values, just changing the text color. So you can also style by ID. So let's say you had a bunch of different labels in your application. You don't want to specify a label CSS because then all the labels get the same style. But you can, so if you style by ID, you can specify, I want these labels to have this style and these labels to have this style. And you can have multiple instances of components have the exact same ID. So you specify the ID by doing this pound and then specifying some unique tag. And then in ActionScript, you can see below, you just set the ID property of the component to be the same thing. And then when that's created, it'll automatically look for that ID inside the CSS. I'm not sure which you mean. Yeah, so ID is a very specific, like, it doesn't have to be unique, right? So I could have two label instances that have the exact same ID, and they'll just take the same properties. It's basically saying, I want to use this CSS. So it has nothing to do, like, with being unique. So the ID is specifically for CSS? Yeah, exactly, yeah. So the question was, is ID specifically for CSS? And the answer is yes. That's a property that we added to our components, not some AIR or AS3 property. Okay, so this is one of the really cool things. You can actually style nested components. So if we look at our box example, we can say, like, you know, maybe we want to always have a label inside of this box. So we're gonna add a label. Well, I don't want to actually go through and add all of this stuff to our box CSS, and then when those properties get set, then go through and inside my class add them to, like, set all these properties to my label. So what we can do is we can nest them. So I can say box and label, and it will look for any labels inside of box and style them as it is automatically. So this goes through the display hierarchy. So what's cool about this is that, let's say I put my label inside of a sprite, which is not a UI component, and then, you know, had that sprite inside my box. It would jump over that sprite and ignore it, and then the chain for CSS would still exist. And so we added some helper methods here because there's a good chance that you'll probably want to, you know, define some text formats in your application that get used by a lot of different components potentially, or, you know, different labels or that sort of thing. And so you can just specify, you know, you see here I've done this H1 CSS tag. I've specified a downstate as well. And then I've instantiated labels here, and I've used this helper method on theme globals called getTextFormat. And you can just pass in the selector that you want, and it'll go and grab that. And there's an optional second parameter that will go and look for the state as well. So if you had a down state, then you could specify that in there. Configuring layout. So we was talking earlier about layouts don't automatically get these values. So we've added 2 helper methods onto theme globals that allow you to basically look up any value or anything in CSS. So we have lookup value and lookup style. And so lookup style will actually go and look up the entire, all of the properties basically in the CSS for that specific selector. So if I wanted to look up this main container CSS that you see here, I would say lookup style main container. And it would go and bring me back an object, and it would have all the different properties and values set in there. Now, the lookup value one is if I only want to get one property, I could say lookup value and pass in main container, and then the second property would be padding left, and then it would return 20 for me. So you can see that value, that example at the below there. Or I've created a new grid layout. I want to make sure that my padding on the left is always 20 in this particular format, and so I can go and look that up and apply that directly. So, you know, when you go to other devices, you probably want to change your padding depending on the DPI. So you can set those up as you need. So here are a couple tips with this. We have 2 different themes inside of our SDK. We've got a white theme and a black theme. And sometimes, not always, but the default is the white theme. And sometimes you'll potentially want to have mixed themes. So you're always resetting the current theme on the fly. If you ever do this, you have to make sure that you re-inject your CSS to overlay on top of it. Because when you set the theme, it kind of erases all the CSS and reinitializes it. So just remember, if you set the theme, even if it's at the beginning of your app or later in your app, that you have to re-inject your CSS. You should always make sure that you inject your CSS before you instantiate any controls. So doing this will make sure that they get the right values and that sort of thing. And then just remember about those 2 helper methods that we've added to theme globals that allow you to kind of basically pull any CSS value out that you like. So one of the things that we recently discovered, so we've had this in the CSS stuff in for the last few months, and we've found that string manipulation in ActionScript is really slow. And so if you're just doing one method of it, it's probably still sub-0 millisecond, so it's fairly fast. But when you're doing lots of them to try and parse the CSS, all those sub-0 milliseconds start to add up. So we looked at some of the more complicated apps and some of the apps that had bigger CSS files in them, and it would take something like 400 milliseconds to parse that CSS. And there wasn't really much that we could do to optimize the ActionScript portion of this parsing. And so that's all happening at startup, which is not really good. We don't want your apps to be a minimum of half a second to start up. So what we ended up doing is we ended up creating these Ant scripts that at build time would take our CSS file and parse them into a kind of a native array that we would be able to just take that array and pass that into theme globals, and it would greatly reduce the parsing. So it's basically we've removed all the parsing from startup and added it to build time, and now it takes 10 milliseconds instead of 400. So I've got a sample up on GitHub that you can find. It's the CSS sample. It has the sample that I'm going to show really, really quickly here, as well as the Ant scripts and everything that allows you to do this, so you can take and modify and add it yourself. So if you're doing this, it's really important that you have a look at this because it'll greatly reduce the startup time in your applications. So I'm just going to switch and going to show a quick demo of that. I'm not going to go over the code too much, but if we can just switch over to the laptop. Okay, so you can see here I've got my box class. So I have I've added a label to it. I've created this CSS ID. It's box. I've created my color method, getter and setter. And then I go through and draw my box and add the label and resize it and that sort of thing. Then I have this style CSS file that I have box. I set the color. And this start width and start height is actually kind of a cool thing. This is your kind of special properties that you can set in your CSS. And this will actually, when the component initializes, this is what the width and height will be. Okay, so it's kind of a trick there that you can do. So you don't have to always resize and set the width and height automatically. And then I've got my box and label styles here, and then I can set the alignment and the color and the size. And so if you go to the CSS, I have up here, I commented it out, but it's still here if you want to embed the CSS file. And here as well, I'm doing the inject on the embed. But you can see here I have this theme globals.inject style array, and it's core styles.style. And it's saying right now it can't find this because I haven't actually built it. So I created this Ant script, and you can see it here. It's fairly straightforward. It passes in, it's right here, an input. So the CSS file that you're going to pass in, the output of the ActionScript file that you want this to write to. So this is the destination of it. And we also have a template so that it's going to use. And the template looks like this. And so I have it set up here. So I have my package name. And there's a title that you could change inside of the JavaScript file that actually does all this parsing, and you could change this property if you wanted to and change what it outputs, but probably not worth the time to do that. So I have it all set up here, and if I just run it quickly, you can see that if I refresh this now, it's created this core styles array. And it basically just looks like this. So it's kind of like a file format. So this is The selector, it has 3 properties, and then you've got, color, like property, value, property, value, property, value. And that's how it basically gets parsed. So I can go back to here, and I can import that. And now the application will compile. Okay, any questions about CSS at all? Yeah, John? Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, is the difference between the execution of the old way versus large way. So are you talking about like when you go and look things up, or the startup time? So the parsing and stuff like that. Yeah. So the old way, or like the embedded way, if you just use the CSS, as an example, on a large one that we saw, we would take like 400 milliseconds to parse that. When we changed it to this method, it went down to like 12 milliseconds. So it is like, it's kind of like a no-brainer. This, like, you should do this at all costs. But I want to, show both ways, because you may not need to. Like this specific example that I'm showing, you could go the embedded route and it wouldn't make a difference, really, right? Because it's fairly small. But if you have large amounts of stuff and you don't have Ant set up in your build environment, whatever, then I want to make sure that you show both ways. Okay, cool. Can we go back to the first computer, the slides? Can we go back to the slides, please? Okay, so one quick thing about QNext device.ani. So on PlayBook, we had it as QNext device.swick. It's replaced with QNext device.ani. And so what this allows us to do is it allows us to take, this is where a lot of the platform APIs live. So these aren't UI controls or anything, but this is stuff like localization, Invoke framework, share framework, that sort of thing. There was a real problem before having it as a SWIC, because a lot of these classes rely on the platform and rely on custom modifications to our AIR runtime. And so if you'd run it on your desktop, you'd get all these errors because it couldn't find things that it was trying to look for. But now what we've done is, now that we've put this all on the device, we can create these kind of stubbed out versions of the classes that will actually make it run on the desktop. So you won't get errors. You'll be able to go through. Things might not work as intended, but at least you'll be able to kind of go through your app and it won't just stop. So that's a good thing for testing. Quick thing on creating skins. We found, this is the old way that we used to do it on PlayBook. So when your skin initialized inside of a component, you would go through and initialize all the different states for your component and set that asset for the specific state that it was for. And then when the component changed states, it would automatically go look these things up and use them and show them. The issue with this is that, let's say this is a button. If the user never interacts with this button, it's created, in this specific case, 2 different assets that it doesn't need to do. It didn't need to because it was never shown to the user. So when you start to multiply this by all the different controls that you have in your application, you can see that this is wasted memory overhead, and as well as initialization time for these components, because they're never going to be used. So what we've done is we've replaced this method with this new method that's called getSkinForState. And the component, when it says, okay, I'm going to change the state, and the skin says, okay, we're going to change the state, custom skin, go and get me the skin or the asset for this state. And so what you want to do is create like a switch statement like this, and you want to check. So you can see the first one there in the up case. We've got asset equals, if the upskin exists, then just use upskin. If it doesn't exist, then create the asset and set it to the upskin variable. So this way, if you ask for the upstate multiple times, you're not recreating the same thing over and over again. You just store that in a private variable in your class, and then it gets reused. Okay, so this greatly reduces the memory usage and consumption of your application because you're not creating assets and bitmaps and whatever unnecessarily. Okay, so here's some of the new stuff that I haven't talked about yet before. So first time. So active frames. So active frames, you've seen this kind of talked about in the keynote a little bit, as well as probably maybe in some other sessions. But active frames is this concept where when your application gets minimized, you can replace what is in that window and update it while your app is still running or minimized. So, this is a great example. Calendar, the weather application is going to do this on the device, so it updates the forecast. Stuff like the music application. If it's playing music in the background and it changes songs, you probably want to update the cover to look at this as well. So I think this basically goes through everything that I talked about. So if you don't implement this at all, it's just going to take a screenshot of your application and just put it in there. Okay, so and one of the big things is that you can update these things while you're minimized, but there's a little bit of work in that. So we'll show you how to do that. So let's have a look at how this works. Let's go to the other computer here. Okay, let's close all these. So I've created this really simple sample. That is basically a clock, and I'm just outputting the time to a label. And when I minimize the clock, I'm going to tell it to wake up every 20 seconds and re-render the cover and show the cover. So the one trick that you need to remember is that if you're updating this thing on a regular basis, the platform's not going to be happy and probably will just ignore your render requests. So you want to do this on an infrequent basis. So if you were making that music application, I wouldn't be updating every second to show the progress of the song. I would just maybe do it when the song ends or there's a new song that comes on, that sort of thing. So I've just done 20 seconds just to kind of show that there's a difference. So here I am creating my label, just kind of setting it up. I've created a timer, so I update the actual time every second. And so here's where the active cover stuff comes in, so or active frame. So the kind of real name of it is active frames. We call it QNext cover because we built this API way before active frames ever existed, the word for that anyways. So you want to look for the QNext cover APIs that are there. So there's several different transitions. So you can set a transition that goes from your application to your cover. So right now I've set it to none, but I think there's a few here. You can have it slide in. You can have it just do the default, which I think right now is fade, and then you can have it fade or crossfade in. But I have it set to none right now. And then you get these different events. So you get an event when your cover is being seen, when your cover is no longer being seen, and if your cover has ever changed size. So you have to be aware that the cover size may be different on different devices. So make sure to always resize your cover and based on what the size that these APIs are reporting. And then I'm setting an alarm or a listener for the alarm, so when I set the alarm later, I can wake up and render. So here we go. I'm going to create a cover. So there's two different ways that you can use a cover. You can create a native window, put some stuff on the stage of that native window, and use that native window as your cover. Or you can just pass a file. So let's say you have a static frame that you want to use or image that you want to use. It doesn't need to be updated in real time, but you just want it to look a little bit nicer than what it would be otherwise if it was just a screenshot. So, a good example of that may be a game. You might have it minimized, and then it might say pause, or it might just show the logo or something like that. You can just pass it a file, and it will load that image for you. So I chose the native window case because it's a little bit more complicated. Not much, or I shouldn't say complicated, let's just say it's more involved. So we set up some window options. I create a native window to my cover class here. These are very important. You have to set these right after you initialize or create your native window, or else things probably won't work right. So make sure that these are done right after. There's a small window that you have to set these in, and so if you do it right away, then you should be fine. And so I said you can set the stage mode, stage scale mode in the line. You set it to invisible to start. So in this one, I just created a bitmap on the fly so that I fill the background of the window, and so it's red just so we can see it. And then I add a label to it so we can update that time, and then I can activate that cover. And then, and so this is, and then, so what I'll also do is set the width and height of the cover, and then I set the width and height of all the internal elements just to kind of position them all. So you get the width and the height of the cover is basically here, cover width and cover height. So I'm going to skip this guy. And so when we get our cover size event, so our size of the cover has been dispatched to us, we're going to go ahead and create our cover, and then we're going to set our cover to the window that we've just created. Okay, and then so here I've got when a cover enters, basically that means that our application has been deactivated and it goes into the background. And so when your app is inactive, it stops rendering. And so what we have to do, also ActionScript kind of stops too. So enter frames and these sorts of things kind of stop. So you have to set this special alarm. It's this QNext system set alarm. And I've set it to 20. So it's going to fire this event and dispatch this event to me, even though my app is for all intents and purposes stopped. And this allows me to wake up, set my inactive mode to something that I can render. I'm going to render my window, and then I'm going to kind of go back to sleep. So if you look at this onAlarm function, which is my event handler for this guy here. So I just store the current mode, the current power mode that I'm at. I can set the current power mode to normal. So normal means that I can actually render stuff. I update my time, and then go back to the original one. Okay, so let's maybe see what this looks like. It's not the prettiest of examples. Can you go to the HDMI, please? Okay, so we've got our time up at the top there. And when I minimize it, make note of the time. So you can see there it's at 29 seconds. And so if we wait 20 seconds, you should see it say 49. So we'll just give it a bit. Just so that we can see that it works. There we go, 49. So fairly easy to do. Just a few lines of code there, depending on how complex your cover actually is. You should be able to get this up and running fairly easy. So I recommend doing this, and even if it is just a static image, kind of makes when you get all of these things kind of lined up in in the home screen, you launch a bunch of different applications. You know, they kind of look a little bit nicer than just the screenshot of your app all kind of scaled down and squished. So, okay, let's go back to the slides, please. Computer one. Okay, so we're kind of slowly running out of time, so I'm going to go through this. Anything that I don't get through today, I have a unconference session tomorrow where I'll go through the rest of it, and anything that you want me to go through. So we'll kind of go through this quickly. So I want to talk about the anatomy of a BlackBerry 10 application. There are a lot of things that make the application kind of look and feel native. So it's one thing to have all these controls look the same, but if you don't kind of follow the application behaviors or the application patterns that has been set out, then it's not going to be the exact same experience. Cascades has provided this application framework so that you basically get all of this stuff from, I don't want to say free, but almost free. We haven't implemented that application framework, so you're kind of free to put controls wherever you want to, do whatever you like. But we've also created this sample application called the Weather Guesser app that kind of builds some of that application framework for you. This is all on GitHub as well. You can go pull this down and then kind of just sub out the views for it, if you will. So we are working on this application framework. We're updating this app to, in this sample, to kind of have these things. And once we feel like we have something that's solid and has all the different behaviors that we want, then we'll consider potentially bundling that into the SDK. But we won't force you to use it. So the first thing is the action bar. So that's the thing along the bottom. Let's use a kind of close-up view of it. So the action bar class is the class that you'll want to look for in the SDK. It should always put it at the bottom of your class. And to get those different buttons on it, you create these action objects, and you can put them on the bar. And so there's kind of two different types of actions that you want to put on there. So there's the basic action and action class. And actions are to perform actions on the content that you're currently looking at. So it could be delete that action. It could be edit. It could be resort or relay out or something like that. And tab action is more navigational. So when you press the tab action button on the action bar, it's going to kind of change views for you and kind of go to a different spot in your application. And there's kind of two modes that the action bar can be in. The action bar can have tabs have priority or actions be priority. And so if you look at this sample here, depending on how your application is set up, this has the tabs being the priority. So you can see the tabs go on the left-hand side. And if actions have the priority, that far left one with the three squares will look a little bit different, and I'll show an example of this. And all the actions kind of flow underneath that bar, and then you'll see actions all the way across to the right. Okay, I'll get to questions after this. I want to get through this stuff quickly. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah. So the question was, is that part of the flow panel? So I can show you what's part of that. This is all part of the action bar. So that whole black thing at the bottom is all part of the action bar. Yeah, to the right. Yeah, you get the pane underneath it, right? Yeah, yeah, it's the overflow. So I'll get through all of this. So I'll answer all your questions. So there's two different types of overflows. The first one I'll talk about is the action overflow. So if you have more actions that fit on the bar, you will see on the right-hand side, the last spot will be 3 vertical dots. And when you press that, this menu will come out from the right and show all the different actions that you can press. Okay? The next one is the tab overflow. And so when you press on that, and this is on the left-hand side of the screen. So when you press on that overflow button that you see that's on the bottom right-hand corner of the screenshot there, the 3 vertical lines, your application is supposed to reveal the tab overflow that's underneath, which is also known as the sidebar. So that will show all the different ones there. And so the action bar itself for this tab overflow will dispatch events, drag events, so that you can detect and move your content over, and then it'll show the stuff underneath. So you can basically, in your application, tell the action bar where you want that sidebar to get drawn into and get added to. So you can make sure that it's underneath your content. If you don't set that, it's going to come over top of your content, and it's going to not going to look right. So you want to make sure that you set that. And that example is all in the sample application. So this is basically what I talked about. You want to listen to the dragging. And it's the same when you want to do peeking, like on the back button or anything like that, it dispatches the exact same event. So if you had a back button there instead of the tab overflow, you press on it and drag, and you listen to these drag events, which basically tells you the offset to move your content. So the context menu. So this is similar to the action overflow menu. This is what it looks like, except the action overflow doesn't have a little header at the top there. But when you long press on an object, you can give it actions that you want it to perform. It's kind of like right-click, right, on the desktop. So if you long press on something in a list or a button, you can give it these actions, and this will show up when you long press automatically. So you can give it a title, a subheader, and then a list of actions that you have here. And so the property that you want to look for, set these as on UI component, is called the context actions property. And that takes a vector of action sets. Currently, we only support 1 action set, but we wanted to future-proof ourselves to have the ability to potentially add more when we support more. And so these action sets take, that has a header and a subheader and then a list of actions. And so those actions are basically the same actions that you can put on the action bar, but you don't really want to put a tab action in there. It would be kind of weird. But we also have a delete action. So if you create a delete action, it gets put on the very, very bottom of that context menu, no matter how many actions you have. There's a multi-select action. So when you press this multi-select action, it essentially, you can add new actions to it. So let's say you had, you're building like an image app or a pictures app. You would say, select a more. And then you would potentially replace all of the actions with, delete, copy, move, share, that sort of thing. And then the user would be able to actually interact with the content and select multiple items, and then be able to respond to the different actions when the user pressed them. And this invoke action item is a kind of interesting one. So if we take that kind of pictures example again, and you know that your pictures are PNGs, you basically say that the MIME type of this content that I have is a PNG, and here's the path to the file. And it will go off into the platform and look at all of the different applications that support that MIME type and different actions. So it'll come back and it'll probably say something like share. And if you clicked on share, then it would give you a list of applications that support sharing images. So you'd probably see stuff like BBM, email, Facebook, Twitter, whatever else. You might also see edit instead of share. And so you might see edit, and there might be a picture editor app on the device, that sort of thing. So this allows you to pass data from your application to different applications or share your content within your app to other applications, to other services on the device. So it's a good one to get to know fairly well. And the last one is the title bar. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the title bar in the actual SDK yet. But I've created a title bar component. I put the black and the white assets for the theme in the repo, so you can pull them out and use it as you will. It will be coming sometime in the future, and it should always be at the top of the screen. And so currently right now we just have a very basic one with a label in it, but we will have in the future different title bars, so you can do drop-down title bars and segmented control title bars and all the other various title bars that exist in Cascades. We currently don't have a timeline for it yet, but is it going to be prior to release? I'm not sure yet. Okay, I have 4 minutes left, 3 now. I'm going to talk about cards really, really fast, and I will show this all tomorrow in greater detail so that we can have more time. But we talked a little about cards in the keynote. So you have all these different cards. You have file pickers and camera cards and contact cards and all these different cards that you can do. Well, you can build your AIR application to be a card itself. And then you could also invoke other cards. So there's 3 different types of cards that we have on the platform. There's a previewer card, a picker card, and a composer card. So you can kind of guess what these all would be. Something like a previewer is, you would just launch, you want to preview an image, it would launch and load up the image in there, and you basically just look at it. Picker is something you want to be able to pick. So the contact picker, for instance, you want to pick a contact from all the contacts in your system. You would call the contact picker and click it, and the user would select it, and it would return that contact to you. And then composer is something like if you were to sign into somewhere. So if you needed to sign into, let's say, Facebook or your application service or whatever, you could create a composer card and sign in and authenticate stuff, or write a Word document or whatever. So we have base classes for all these things that kind of provide you with the base structure for all these different types of cards, and you just basically fill in the middle part with all your content. So setting up your card, you add this kind of small snippet to your bar descriptor XML. So give your target an ID, so your card's an ID, so this is going to have to be unique. Then you can specify the type, so there's 3 different types: card.picker, card.previewer, card.composer, really straightforward. You can also specify a specific action that you want to have with your card. You don't need to do this, but if you know that you have a card for viewing, you have a card for sharing, you have a card for editing, that sort of thing, you can have some different filters for your card. And then you can also give your card a MIME type. So if you were just taking in text, you could, if somebody asked for all the targets that support the text MIME type, then your card would come up there. And so when your card starts up, or your application, you could compile this all into the same binary. So if you had an application and part of that application was a specific card, then you could kind of bundle all the stuff into one. And so what you want to do is there's this event on the Invoke manager called Invoke. And you want to listen for this event. This is basically the very first thing you want to do inside of your application is listen for this event. When this event is fired, you can kind of do something like this code block that I have here. I have a sample of this all up on GitHub as well that you can go and look at. Or if it's not up on GitHub now, it will be shortly. So you can check what the startup mode is, and you can see that, okay, I've been invoked. You can get the request object that you've been started up with. So any data that was passed to you will all come into here, and as well as the target. So you can see that the target equals my picker that I created. And So now I know that, okay, I'm being launched as the picker, and I'll go and initialize my UI as necessary. A couple tips on this. Cards are pooled. So if one application requests the card, it starts it up and uses it. That application closes down. Another application asks for the exact same card. It will use the same instance of that if it's still available. So this greatly reduces startup time for re-showing the exact same card over and over again in multiple applications. So the important thing about this is that when your card is closed, you just listen for this event on your card class, the event.close. You want to kind of get rid of any data that's already there so that you can, when you reinitialize it or view it a second time, it kind of comes up clean in a state that's acceptable. So here's how you would invoke a different card. So let's say I wanted to invoke a card from my application or any target. This goes for cards or other applications. You can just launch an application if you like. So you want to look at the invoke method on Invoke Manager. And so you create this invoke request object, and it's got a bunch of different properties on it. But if you know the target that you want to invoke, you can just specify the target, and then you pass in the request object to the invoke method, and it will launch it for you. I'll go through this last little bit. How much time do I actually have left? I'm over. Am I over, or? Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna load up. Okay. Does anybody have questions while I do this? So the question was, are they separate instances of the application? If your application is running, is yes, they are separate instances. And if two applications launch the card at the same time, then there'll be two instances of that card. So it's not like the pool will take it from one application and put it in the other one. It'll start up a new instance of it. Here's some information about 6 o'clock. You can come talk to me there. I can show the demo there as well. There's some stuff about Twitter and hashtags and what have you. Some other stuff. Don't forget. Yes, today, 6 p.m. And then that's that. Yeah, go ahead, clap. Okay, really quick, can we show the HDMI? This will take 2 seconds. I'll just show you what a card looks like. It is recorded, yes. Yes, you'll be able to download this. You'll download all the code. You can download the video and watch it and all that good stuff. So if I launch the card, see it kind of goes black. Because I'm in debug mode, it shows that. But I have this list of countries, and this is a picker card. So I have a to cancel and a done at the top and a title and all these guys. And then if I pressed on this and click done, it goes away. But then if I launch it again, you can see how fast it comes back, right? Compared to, because it's pooled, right? So you can see the big difference there. And all the different cards have different animations. So the picker one comes in from the bottom. One of the other ones comes in from the side, slides in, and has a back button. You can peek it and do all that kind of stuff. So yes, they're always full page. Yeah, there is another concept called viewers, which you can have that is not full screen and position it anywhere and size it to anything. But that's something completely different. So I hope to see you guys at 6 o'clock. Come to my unconference session. I'm not sure what time it is. If you go look at the board, I'm table 7, last slot. If you think of anything else that you'd like me to talk during that unconference session, ping me on Twitter, or come and talk to me now or in the hall or whatever. I can write up some samples tomorrow. We can just do it on the fly. You can ask me to live code. Whatever you guys want to do, I'll do it. So.